I never wanted trouble. That's why I took the job, pouring whiskey, cleaning glasses, keeping my head down. But I was a cowboy, the kind of job where folks forget your name, the kind of job where no one gives a damn about your past. Until they walked in. A gang of outlaws, swaggering like they owned the place, mean grins plastered on their faces and twitchy fingers ready to draw. They stank of liquor and bad decisions, like they'd been soaking in both for days. They saw a quiet bartender, a man who didn't raise a hand when they knocked over glasses, spat on the floor, or laughed right in my face. They saw a coward, but they didn't know me. They didn't know who I used to be. And when their leader pulled his pistol, ready to turn me into his evening entertainment, that's when I decided it was time to remind them. I let the silence stretch for a moment, and then I spoke up, my voice low, cold, like the calm before a storm. Before the last echo of my words could fade, my hand was already reaching for my Colt. They saw a bartender, but the truth was simple. I wasn't just some guy hiding behind a bar. I was a cowboy, and they were about to find out why you never push a cowboy too far. "Nate, have you ever thought about taking a day off?" Emma asked, counting the night's earnings behind the bar. Her question earned her the slight upturn of my mouth that passed for a smile these days. "What would I do with a day off, Miss Emma?" My voice was soft, almost gentle, the kind of voice that made most folks lean in closer to hear. It was also the kind of voice that made him underestimate me, which suited me just fine. The saloon was quiet that afternoon. Just old Walt Jenkins nursing his usual whiskey in the corner, and Doc Green reading his medical journal at his regular table. The doc glanced up occasionally, his eyes meeting mine in that knowing way they had. Of all the people in Whisper Valley, only Doc Green knew why my hands, now so careful with the delicate glassware, had once been feared throughout the Arizona territory. The peaceful routine was interrupted by the jingle of spurs as Marshal McAllister pushed through the batwing doors, his weathered face creased with concern. "Afternoon, Emma. Nate." He nodded to us both, then made his way to the bar. "Got word from Cedar Ridge. Blackwood gang's been spotted heading this way." My hands didn't pause in their work, but something flickered in my eyes, a shadow so brief anyone else might have missed it. Emma didn't miss much, though. She'd been running the Silver Star long enough to read men better than most. "Red Jack Blackwood?" she asked, her voice dropping. "Thought he and his bunch stayed up north near the railroad." "Times change," McAllister sighed, accepting the coffee I silently placed before him. "They hit 3 banks in the last month. Latest word says they're moving south. Probably looking for easier targets now that the railroad's beefed up security." Doc Green had set aside his journal, listening intently. "How many in his gang now, Bob?" "5 that we know of," the marshal replied. "Blackwood, Clay Thorne, the Reed twins, and that young hothead, Lucas Reeves. Mean bunch. They don't just rob, they make a show of it, like to humiliate folks before they kill 'em." My hands finally stilled on the glass I was polishing. For just a moment, my fingers traced an old scar on my right palm, a habit none of them had ever mentioned, but all had noticed. "Whisper Valley ain't got nothing worth their trouble," Emma said firmly, as if speaking, it would make it true. "They'll pass us by." "Maybe," McAllister agreed, but his eyes drifted to me. "Still, it might be wise to send word to Carson City. Get some extra deputies out here, just in case." "Takes 3 days for help to arrive from Carson City," I spoke softly, resuming my work. "If they're coming, they'll be here sooner than that." The marshal studied me for a long moment. "You seem mighty sure about that, Nate." "Just arithmetic, Marshal, nothing more." But my words carried a weight that made the room feel suddenly smaller. This was the first ripple, the first sign the quiet waters I'd found myself in were about to get real troubled. The thought of what was coming, it sat heavy, like a stone in my gut. Old Walt chose that moment to stumble to his feet, fishing in his pockets for coins. "Reckon I better head home 'fore dark. Them clouds rolling in look like rain." He nodded to Emma. "Put it on my tab, Miss Hawthorne." "Just like always, Walt," she smiled, making a note in her ledger. As the old man shuffled out, Doc Green gathered his things as well. Think I'll do the same. Nate, don't forget to pick up those medicines I ordered for your headaches. Came in on yesterday's stage. I nodded, though everyone in the room knew I hadn't suffered a headache in all the years they'd known me. It was just one of those little fictions we all maintained, like pretending not to notice how I always kept my right hand free when serving drinks, or how my eyes constantly scanned the room, even when it was empty. As the afternoon deepened toward evening, Grace O'Malley appeared for her nightly performance, her red hair catching the last rays of sunlight as she sat up near the piano. Her voice, when she began to warm up, was sweet and clear, a touch of beauty in a town that often had too little of it. "Rider comin'," Emma announced from her spot by the window. "Movin' fast." My hands remained steady as I arranged bottles on the shelf, but my stance shifted ever so slightly. To most, I still looked like nothing more than a simple bartender preparing for the evening rush. But Marshall McAllister saw how my weight had settled on the balls of my feet, ready to move in any direction. The sound of thundering hooves grew louder, then stopped abruptly outside the saloon. The batwing doors burst open, revealing a young ranch hand, his face flushed with exertion and fear. Marshall McAllister, they're comin', the Blackwood gang. They just shot up Cedar Ridge, killed the sheriff and his deputies. They're headed this way." In the sudden silence that followed, I carefully set down the bottle I was holding. My movements were still measured, still precise, but now they carried an entirely different quality, like a mountain lion uncoiling before a leap. "How far?" McAllister demanded. 2 hours, maybe less. They're moving fast." The ranch hand swallowed hard. "And they're killing everyone in their path." Emma's hand went to her throat. "Mother of God." "Get word to everyone," McAllister ordered. "Tell them to bar their doors and windows. Nobody on the streets after dark." He turned to Emma. "Might want to close up early tonight." "No," my quiet voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Keep the saloon open, just like any other night." They all turned to look at me, but my eyes were fixed on something distant, seeing perhaps not the bottle-lined shelves before me, but something from long ago. "Nate?" Emma's voice held a question. "Some folks," I said softly, "need to learn that the quietest rattler strikes the deepest." Even saying it, I felt a chill. That was the old me talking, the one I'd buried. But some graves just won't stay closed. Evening crept into Whisper Valley like a thief, bringing with it an unseasonal chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The Silver Star Saloon maintained its usual appearance, but tension hung in the air as thick as tobacco smoke. Grace's usual song seemed more melancholy than ever, her voice carrying notes of warning that everyone felt, but nobody mentioned. Marshall McAllister had positioned himself by the window, occasionally glancing down the darkening street. The few patrons who remained hunched over their drinks, speaking in whispers. "2 riders coming in from the south," McAllister announced, his hand instinctively moving to his gun belt. The saloon fell silent, save for the soft clink of glasses as I continued my work. The riders turned out to be nothing more than traveling salesmen, but their news brought no comfort. "Passed through Cedar Ridge this morning," the older of the 2 men said, hands shaking slightly. "Never seen anything like it. They didn't just rob the bank. They made examples of anyone who looked at them wrong. Sheriff Tanner..." He trailed off, taking another drink. "What about Sheriff Tanner?" Emma pressed. "They made him watch while they shot his deputies. Then they tied him to his horse and..." The salesman couldn't finish. Doc Green, who had returned despite the growing danger, spoke up. "How many dead?" 7 that I counted. Would have been more, but it seems they wanted to leave enough folks alive to spread the word. My movements had slowed almost imperceptibly. My right hand kept straying to a spot under the bar where I knew a shotgun had hung unused for the past 5 years. The younger salesman, trying to lighten the mood, attempted a joke. "Lucky for us, we've got a marshal here, right? Though I reckon even the law might want to think twice about facing Red Jack Blackwood. They say he's got 23 notches on his gun." A strange sound came from behind the bar, something between a scoff and a sigh. All eyes turned to me. "Something funny about that, bartender?" the young man asked, a slight edge to his voice. 23 notches, I said quietly, resuming my task. "Man who needs to count that high isn't much of a gunfighter." The salesman's face reddened. "What would you know about it? You're just a—" "That's enough," Emma cut in sharply. "Nate, could you check the cellar? I think we're running low on that Kentucky bourbon." I nodded and moved toward the cellar door. As I passed Doc Green's table, the physician spoke in a voice only I could hear. "Your old wound bothering you?" "Not yet," I replied softly. "But it will be." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Grace struck up another song, this one about a serpent in the garden. Marshall McAllister moved to the bar. "Emma, a word." He glanced around. "You should know I sent a rider to Carson City, but even if they send help immediately, they won't get here in time," Emma finished. "I know." She looked toward the cellar door. "Bob, about Nate." The marshal warned, "Some secrets are best left buried." But secrets, like corpses, had a way of rising to the surface. This became apparent when 3 local cowhands burst into the saloon, their faces pale. "Found Jimmy Carter's body out by Broken Spoke Creek," one of them reported breathlessly. "Shot clean through the head, execution style. His horse was still saddled, hadn't been dead for more than an hour." The news hit the room like a physical blow. Jimmy Carter was just a kid. "They're closer than we thought," McAllister grimaced. "Emma, maybe now's the time to—" The sound of shattering glass cut through the air as the young salesman dropped his bottle. But it wasn't the noise that silenced the room. It was what followed. From somewhere in the darkness outside came the distant but unmistakable sound of gunfire, followed by screams. I emerged from the cellar, my face impossible to read. But there was something different about me now, something in the way I moved, as if the quiet bartender was slowly falling away like an ill-fitting coat. "Marshall," I said, my voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there before. "You might want to get these folks home while they can still make it." McAllister studied me, then nodded. "All right, everyone out. Head straight home. Bar your doors." He turned to Emma. "You too." "This is my saloon," she started to protest. "Please, Miss Emma," I interrupted. "For once, don't argue." Something in my tone made her pause. She'd never heard me speak that way before, like a man who knew exactly what was coming and had seen it all before. As the patrons hurriedly filed out, Doc Green lingered. "Need any help?" "Best get your medical bag ready, Doc," I replied, beginning to move bottles from the top shelf to below the bar. "Something tells me you'll need it before morning." The distant gunfire came again, closer. The Blackwood gang was coming, and with them, the end of peace in Whisper Valley. That peace I'd guarded so fiercely, it was about to shatter. The Blackwood gang didn't so much enter Whisper Valley as they infected it. Their arrival brought a silence that swept through the streets like a prairie fire. Only the Silver Star's lights remained bright, a beacon in the growing darkness. I heard him before I saw him, the synchronized rhythm of 5 horses moving at a deliberate pace, the confident stride of predators. I kept wiping the same glass as the sound of boots and spurs grew louder outside. The bat-wing doors exploded inward. Jackson Red Jack Blackwood entered first, tall, flame-red hair, a scarlet bandana at his throat. Behind him came Clay Thorne, lean and snake-like, followed by the Reed twins, looking like reflections, and young Lucas Reeves, practically bouncing with poorly contained energy. "Well, ain't this cozy?" Blackwood's voice carried. "Seems most establishments in this charming town decided to close early. How hospitable of you to stay open for weary travelers." I set down my glass with careful precision. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" "Gentlemen?" Thorne laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Hear that, Jack? He called us gentlemen." "Your best whiskey," Blackwood ordered, dropping into a chair, boots on the table. "Leave the bottle." I reached for the top shelf, my movements measured. I could feel their eyes on me, watching for any sign of fear. I gave 'em neither. "You boys aren't from around here," I observed quietly, placing the bottle and glasses on their table. "What gave it away?" Samuel Reed, or perhaps it was Daniel, grinned. "Our refined manners?" "The way you carry your guns," I replied, turning back toward the bar. "Low on the hip, railroad style. Nobody out here draws from that position." The room temperature seemed to drop. Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem to know a lot about guns for a bartender," he said, his tone deceptively casual. "Man learns things," I shrugged, resuming my endless glass polishing. Young Reeves, clearly itching to prove himself, drew his pistol with a flourish. "Man learns things, huh? Learn anything about this?" He spun the gun around his finger. "Learn that's a good way to shoot yourself," I replied, without looking up. The gang laughed, all except Blackwood, who studied me with growing interest. "You got a name, barkeep?" "Nate, just Nate." "Just Nate." Blackwood nodded slowly. Then, without warning, he swept his arm across the table, sending bottles and glasses crashing to the floor. "Well, just Nate, you know what I think? I think you're lying to me, and I don't like being lied to." I finally looked up, my face impassive. "Bottle was $8. The Reed twins burst out laughing, but Blackwood silenced them with a look. He approached the bar slowly. $8? That's steep for rotgut whiskey." He flicked a coin onto the bar. "Here's 2 bits. Buy yourself some manners." I looked at the coin, then back at Blackwood. "Still owe $7.75. "Clay," Blackwood said softly. "Show our friend here what we do to mouthy bartenders." Thorne grinned and started forward, but at that moment, the doors swung open again. Marshal McAllister stood framed in the doorway. "Evening, gentlemen. Might want to reconsider whatever you're thinking." "A marshal!" Blackwood's smile widened. "In this little dust heap? Must be our lucky day." "Way I hear it," McAllister continued, stepping inside. "Cedar Ridge is missing a sheriff and some deputies. You boys wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "Can't say that we do," Blackwood replied. "Though I did hear something interesting about Cedar Ridge. Heard their marshal was a coward. Ran and hid while good men died." His hand drifted toward his gun. "You're not a coward, are you, Marshal?" Everything happened at once. McAllister's hand dropped to his holster, but Blackwood was faster. The shot echoed like thunder. McAllister stumbled backward, red blooming across his chest. "Bob!" My voice cracked for the first time, genuine emotion breaking through. "Stay, behind the bar." McAllister gasped, then crumpled to the floor. Blackwood holstered his smoking gun. "Now, where were we? Ah, yes, teaching some manners to our friend the bartender." Clay Thorne moved forward again, cracking his knuckles. But this time, something had changed in my demeanor. My hands had stopped their endless wiping. My shoulders had straightened. And my eyes had taken on a look that made even Thorne hesitate. "Been a long time since I killed a man," I said softly, almost to myself. Promised myself I was done with it. "Kill him," Blackwood ordered, annoyed by the delay. "Kill him slowly." Thorne reached across the bar to grab my shirt, and that's when everything changed. My hand moved faster than seemed humanly possible, catching Thorne's wrist, yanking him forward. There was a sharp crack as Thorne's face met the solid oak bar. He dropped like a stone, blood pooling beneath his broken nose. That was the moment the quiet bartender died, and something older, something I'd fought for 5 years to keep buried, began to stir. The promise I'd made to Bob, to myself, it was shattering like glass. "Well, well," Blackwood drawled, though his hand had dropped back to his gun. "Looks like our quiet bartender has some fight in him after all." The Reed twins spread out, flanking the bar. Young Reeves bounced on his toes, eager for action. But I stood perfectly still, my eyes fixed on McAllister's motionless form. "Last chance," I said, my voice carrying a weight it hadn't possessed before. Take your friend and ride out. Don't make me break my promise. Blackwood's laugh was genuine this time. Or what? You'll serve us to death? He drew his gun with lightning speed. I think it's time we— The sound of a shotgun being racked cut through his words. I'd produced the weapon from under the bar, its double barrels now pointed squarely at Blackwood's chest. That's what you had in mind all along, wasn't it? Blackwood's smile turned cold. Hiding a scattergun under the bar. Problem is, old man, you can only kill one of us before the others cut you down. True, I agreed. Then, with deliberate care, I set the shotgun on the bar. That's why I won't be using it. My right hand dropped to my side, where no gun had been visible moments before. But now, somehow, a well-worn Colt gleamed in my grip, as if it had materialized from thin air. Been a while, I said softly, since anyone called me the Prairie Shadow. The name fell into the room like a stone into still water, creating ripples of recognition across the faces of Blackwood's gang. Even Clay Thorne, still groggy, stopped trying to stem his bleeding nose. The Prairie Shadow? Young Reeves whispered, his earlier bravado evaporating. That's just a story. They say he died years ago. Stories, I said quietly, my gun unwavering, have a way of coming back to life. Blackwood's face had lost some of its color, but his arrogant smile remained fixed. I heard of you. They say you killed 30 men in a single year. Say you could shoot a man's gun out of his hand at 50 paces. If I'd killed that many, I replied, I wouldn't have bothered counting. The Reed twins exchanged glances, their synchronized movements betraying their nervousness. Boy, I addressed Reeves, without taking my eyes off Blackwood, I'm going to give you a chance your friends won't get. You're young enough to learn from mistakes. Walk out now. Leave your gun, and don't stop riding till you hit Mexico. Reeves looked uncertainly at Blackwood, who spoke through clenched teeth. You take one step toward that door, boy, and I'll kill you myself. Behind the bar, I shifted my weight slightly. The movement was almost imperceptible, but it caused all 5 men to flinch. Last chance, kid. Be smart. For a moment, the young gunslinger seemed to waver. Then his face hardened. No one calls me kid. His hand dropped to his gun. What happened next was so fast it seemed like a single motion. Reeves drew, clearing leather with impressive speed. But I was faster. Impossibly faster. My first shot took Reeves's gun hand, spinning the weapon away in a spray of blood. My second caught the young man's shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor. The Reed twins drew in perfect unison. My gun seemed to speak twice more, without me even looking in their direction. Both twins stumbled backward, clutching their gun arms, their weapons clattering to the floor. You've lost your edge, Shadow, Blackwood sneered, though sweat had broken out on his forehead. Time was, you'd have killed them all. Still might, I replied calmly. Depends on what happens next. Clay Thorne had managed to regain his feet, blood still streaming from his nose. His hand strayed toward his gun. I wouldn't, I warned. You're slower than the others, and I've got 1 bullet left. 1 bullet? Blackwood laughed, but there was a hysterical edge to it. Against the 2 of us? Those aren't good odds, old man. Better than you think. My eyes flickered to McAllister's still form. Bob was more than just a marshal to me. He was there, that day in Deadwood, when I hung up my guns, made me promise to stop killing, made me swear I'd find another way. My voice grew softer. But he's dead now, and that promise died with him. The coldness of those words, even to my own ears, it was like a winter wind. I felt myself slipping further into the man I once was, and a part of me, a dark part, didn't fight it. A movement caught my eye. Emma Hawthorne stood in the doorway, a rifle in her hands. She had returned, drawn by the sound of gunfire. Our eyes met briefly, and I gave an almost imperceptible shake of my head. She understood, stepping back into the shadows. Deadwood, Blackwood said slowly, recognition dawning. That's where you killed Mad Dog Matthews and his whole gang. 8 men, they say. 9, I corrected. People always forget about the lookout, and now you. 10, if Thorn still feels lucky. Thorn spat blood onto the floor. How the mighty have fallen. Man needs peace, I replied. I found mine here, until you brought war to my door. Outside, thunder rumbled. A storm approaching, or perhaps just the echo of the earlier gunfire. The wounded men groaned softly. Way I see it, Blackwood said, his voice taking on a reasonable tone. We're at a stalemate. You're good, maybe the best there ever was, but you can't watch all of us at once. The minute you turn to shoot one, the other will put you down. True, I agreed. If I were still the man who needed to outdraw his enemies. I nodded toward the shotgun still lying on the bar. But I own a saloon now. And a saloon owner, well, he likes to keep a few surprises under the bar. Blackwood's eyes widened as he spotted the thin wire running from behind the bar to the shotgun's trigger. My boot was resting on something, a pedal probably salvaged from an old piano. First man to draw, I explained quietly. Gets both barrels, won't even need to aim. After that, I shrugged. Like you said, one bullet left. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the wounded had stopped their moaning. You're bluffing, Thorn growled, but his hand had moved away from his gun. Maybe, I agreed. Question is, who wants to find out first? A drop of sweat rolled down Blackwood's temple. His fingers twitched near his gun, but he didn't draw. The legend of the Prairie Shadow had grown over the years, but the reality standing before him was somehow more terrifying than the stories. We could still work this out, Blackwood said, forcing a smile. Way I hear it, you used to ride with some pretty rough men yourself. Maybe we could— You killed my friend, I interrupted, my voice colder than anyone in the room had ever heard it. There's only one way this works out now. Behind them, Doc Green had silently entered through the back door and was checking McAllister's pulse. He caught my eye and gave a slight nod. The marshal was alive. Barely. The knowledge seemed to change something in my demeanor. When I spoke again, my voice carried an edge of finality. I've spent 5 years serving drinks to good men and bad, listening to their stories, watching their habits, learning how each man draws, how each man thinks. And you know what I learned? Neither Blackwood nor Thorn answered, but their eyes were fixed on my gun hand. I learned, my finger tightened imperceptibly on the trigger, that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. That moment, knowing Bob was alive, it was like a small light in a vast darkness. But it also meant my promise wasn't entirely dead, and that made things complicated. Thunder rolled outside as Doc Green worked frantically to save Marshal McAllister's life. The wounded Reed twins huddled in a corner while young Reeves lay unconscious. The standoff between me, Blackwood, and Thorn had stretched into a deadly silence. You know, Blackwood said, his voice unnaturally calm, I heard another story about the Prairie Shadow. They say you disappeared after Deadwood because of a woman. That true? Something flickered in my eyes, a shadow of old pain. You talk too much. Hit a nerve, did I? Blackwood's smile widened. They say she died. Say you weren't fast enough to save her. Jack, Thorn warned, seeing something change in my expression. Sarah, I said softly, the name falling from my lips like a prayer. Her name was Sarah. Emma, still watching from the shadows, saw my hands tremble slightly, the first sign of emotion I had shown all night. Ah, so it is true, Blackwood pressed his advantage. The great Prairie Shadow, brought low by a woman's death. Tell me, did she die quick, or— The shotgun roared, its double blast deafening in the confined space. Blackwood and Thorn dove in opposite directions as splinters exploded from the wall behind where they had been standing. My boot had pressed the pedal, but I hadn't aimed to kill, only to scatter 'em. That was your surprise under the bar? Blackwood laughed, rolling to his feet. Now what? Now, I said quietly, we do this the old way. My gun seemed to materialize in my hand again, but this time Blackwood was ready. Both men fired simultaneously. My bullet took Blackwood's hat off, while Blackwood's shot creased my shoulder, tearing my shirt and drawing blood. "First blood to me!" Blackwood grinned, but his smile faded as he saw I hadn't even flinched. "You know why they called me the Prairie Shadow?" I asked, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Wasn't for the obvious reasons. Wasn't because I was quiet, or fast, or deadly, though I was all those things. I stepped out from behind the bar for the first time, my movements liquid smooth despite my wound. It was because of what Marshal McAllister taught me, back when he was just Deputy Bob, and I was just another angry kid with a fast gun. "Shut up and fight!" Blackwood snarled, but his voice shook slightly. "Bob taught me that a man's shadow is always with him, but you only see it when there's light." I took another step forward. "He taught me that every killer, every murderer, every man who thinks his gun makes him important, they all cast shadows too. And if you watch those shadows long enough—" My gun barked once more, and Thorne screamed, his hidden derringer, half drawn from his boot, clattering across the floor. "You can see what they're going to do before they do it." "Impossible!" Thorne gasped, clutching his bleeding hand. "You couldn't have seen." 5 years, I continued, my eyes never leaving Blackwood. 5 years I've watched men draw their guns in this saloon, watched their shoulders tense, their weight shift, their shadows move across the floor. 1,000 little tells that say when a man's about to kill. "Fascinating lesson," Blackwood sneered, though he had gone pale. "Why did you become a bartender? To study your prey?" "No." For the first time, real emotion crept into my voice. "I became a bartender because Bob showed me there was more to life than killing. He taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by his speed with a gun or the notches on his belt. He taught me about peace." "Peace?" Blackwood laughed harshly. "Peace is for cowards." "Peace," I cut him off, "is for men who've seen enough death to know its true cost. Bob taught me that. Sarah taught me that. And for 5 years I lived it." "Until now," Blackwood said softly. "Until now," I agreed. That word, peace, it tasted like ash in my mouth just then. Because the truth was, a part of me was coming alive in a way it hadn't for years, and that part didn't feel peaceful at all. Doc Green's voice cut through the tension. "I've got the bleeding stopped, but he needs proper care, and soon. You hear that?" My voice hardened. "The man you shot, the man who taught me everything I know about being human instead of just being a killer, he's still alive. Which means my promise to him still holds." Something like hope flickered across Blackwood's face. "So you won't—" "But here's what Bob never understood," I continued, as if Blackwood hadn't spoken. "Sometimes a man has to break a promise to keep a bigger one. Sometimes peace can only be protected by men willing to do violence." Thunder crashed again, closer now, and rain began to patter against the windows. In that moment, Emma saw the transformation complete, saw the quiet bartender she'd known for 5 years become something else entirely. The Prairie Shadow no longer seemed like just a legend. "I know what you're thinking," I said softly. "You're thinking that even if I am who I say I am, it's been 5 years. You're thinking maybe I've lost my edge, gotten soft-serving drinks to cowboys and settlers." My gun disappeared into its holster, a holster that somehow seemed more visible now, as if it had always been there, waiting. "You're thinking," I continued, "that you're still faster than some washed-up legend, that the stories about me were just that, stories. Weren't they?" Blackwood's hand hovered near his gun. "No," I said simply. "They weren't stories. They were warnings." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in stark white. In that frozen moment, Emma saw us all like figures in a photograph. Blackwood coiled to strike, Thorne bleeding on the floor, the Reed twins huddled in their corner, Doc Green working desperately over McAllister's still form. And me. I stood like a man who had finally stopped pretending to be something he wasn't. The shadow had returned. "Last chance," I said quietly. "Surrender. face the law, live to see another sunrise. Blackwood's smile was terrible to behold. You know I won't. No, I agreed, my voice heavy with certainty. You won't. The rain drummed against the saloon windows, nature's own percussion for the deadly dance about to unfold. Lightning flickered again, and in its stark illumination, my shadow stretched across the floor, long and dark. Before this goes any further, I said, my voice carrying the weight of experience, there's something you should know about watching men die. Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly. And what's that? It changes you. Every time. Each death leaves a mark that can't be washed away. My eyes drifted to the wounded men around the room. That's another thing Bob taught me, why he made me swear to find another way. Touchin', Blackwood sneered, but his eyes betrayed his unease. Is this how the great prairie shadow fights now? By talking his enemies to death? No, I replied calmly. This is how he gives them a chance to live. My gaze swept the room. All of you, listen carefully, because these next few minutes will determine who walks out of here. Emma, still by the door, saw something she'd never witnessed before. I was teaching, just as Marshall McAllister had once taught me. But my lesson was painted in shades of survival and death. Most men, I continued, think gunfighting is about who can draw fastest, shoot straightest. I shook my head slowly. But it's about reading. About knowing. As if to demonstrate, my hand moved like lightning, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. The bullet knocked Thorne's second hidden gun, this one from his sleeve, across the floor before the man could fully produce it. Like knowing when a man's about to do something stupid, I added quietly. Thorne cursed, clutching his newly bleeding hand. The Reed twins pressed themselves further into their corner. You've been watching us, Blackwood realized aloud. All this time we've been talking, reading us like you said. 5 years serving drinks, I nodded. You learn to read men, the way they stand, the way they breathe, the way their eyes move. My voice took on an instructor's tone. Like how your right foot turns out slightly before you draw, or how Thorne's left eye twitches when he's about to try something foolish. Blackwood's face darkened. You think knowing that makes you invincible? No, I replied. But it means I can do this. My gun disappeared into its holster again. I turned my back on Blackwood, walking to the bar with measured steps. Behind me, Blackwood's hand darted toward his gun. I wouldn't, I said, without turning. Your weight's on your back foot. You'd miss. Blackwood's hand froze, his face a mask of frustrated rage. You're just guessing. Am I? I picked up a bottle, poured 2 glasses. Your breathing changed, shortened. Your spurs clinked when you shifted your weight. The floorboard under your left boot creaked. I turned, holding both glasses. Little things. Things most men never notice. But Bob noticed them. Taught me to notice them too. Turned me from a fast gun into something else entirely. A bartender? Blackwood spat. A student, I corrected. Every man who walked into this saloon taught me something. How bullies telegraph their punches, how liars blink too often, and how killers... I looked directly at Blackwood. Can't keep their eyes off their target. As if to prove my point, Blackwood's gaze darted to my gun hand, then back to my face. The prairie shadow, one of the Reed twins whispered. They say he could shoot a man's gun hand at 50 paces in pitch darkness. Could, I agreed. Can. Because Bob taught me that in darkness, you don't need to see. You listen. You feel. You know. To demonstrate, I closed my eyes. Right now, Thorne is trying to inch toward the shotgun on the floor. The Reed boys are thinking about making a break for the back door. And you, Blackwood... My eyes opened. You're wondering if you can get to that derringer in your vest before I can draw. The outlaw's face went pale. No one had seen the hidden gun. It was completely concealed by his vest. How? Blackwood started. The way your vest hangs. The slight bulge. The way you keep your left elbow tucked in. My voice was almost gentle now. Details. Always details. The truth was, I was enjoying this dance a little too much. The careful observation, the prediction, it was a cold satisfaction, but satisfaction nonetheless. Doc Green spoke up from where he worked on McAllister. The marshal's stable, but his pulse is weak. He needs a doctor's office, proper tools. I nodded without taking my eyes off Blackwood. Then it's time to end this, one way or another. You can't watch all of us at once, Shadow, Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't need to. Already know what you're all going to do. My voice hardened slightly. The twins will run. They're cowards at heart. Thorn will try something clever and get himself killed. And you... I paused. You'll go for your gun, because your pride won't let you do anything else. You're awfully sure of yourself, Blackwood growled. No, I corrected. I'm sure of you. Men like you, they're all the same. Think their reputation makes them special. Thinking being feared makes them important. I shook my head slowly. But fear is just another tell. Another shadow to read. Lightning flashed again, and this time, when the thunder rolled, it seemed to shake the very foundations of the saloon. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. Last chance, I said quietly. Because once this starts, all the lessons in the world won't help you. Once this starts, I stop being the bartender. Stop being a student. My voice dropped to barely a whisper. I become what I was before. What Bob tried so hard to help me leave behind. And what's that? Blackwood asked, though his face suggested he already knew the answer. My reply was simple. Final. Death walkin'. The moment shattered like a mirror-hitting stone. The Reed twins made their break for the back door, just as I'd predicted. Thorn lunged for the fallen shotgun, his movements telegraphed seconds before he began. And Blackwood went for his hidden derringer with snake-like speed. But I was faster. I'd been faster 5 years ago, and time hadn't changed that truth. My first shot caught the back door's heavy wooden beam, dropping it into place just as the twins reached it. My second knocked the shotgun another foot away from Thorn's grasping fingers. And my third sent Blackwood's derringer spinning through the air in a spray of blood and splinters from the outlaw's vest pocket. All 3 shots had come so close together they sounded like a single rolling thunderclap. Jesus Christ, one of the twins whispered. That's 3 bullets, Blackwood snarled, clutching his bleeding hand. How many you got left, Shadow? Enough, I replied simply. More than enough. But Emma, still watching from her position near the front door, saw something the others didn't. A slight tightening around my eyes. I'd fired 3 shots in impossibly quick succession, and even legends had their limits. You're not as fast as you used to be, Blackwood taunted, seemingly reading the same signs. The old Shadow would have killed us all by now. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe Bob's lessons went deeper than you think. Thunder crashed outside, as if emphasizing my words. Wasn't trying to kill you, I replied. Not yet. That brought Blackwood up short. What? Giving you a chance to see what you're up against. To make the smart choice. My eyes swept the room. All of you. Because what happens next? That's on your heads, not mine. The Reed twins exchanged glances, then slowly raised their hands. We surrender, one of them said. The kid was right. This ain't worth dying over. Cowards, Blackwood spat. But I was already moving. With smooth efficiency, I pulled 2 pairs of handcuffs from behind the bar, where they'd hung next to the shotgun all these years, and slid 'em across the floor to the twins. Put 'em on each other, I ordered. Tight. I'll know if you don't. As the twins complied, Thorn made his move. He'd been inching toward a broken bottle, its jagged edge gleaming in the lamplight. But before he could grasp it, my boot came down on his wrist. 5 years, I said softly, applying pressure until Thorn gasped in pain. 5 years I watched men like you plan desperate things. Saw it in their eyes, their hands, the way they looked at broken glass or empty bottles. I increased the pressure slightly. Amazin' what a man learns tendin' bar. You're enjoyin' this, Blackwood accused. All that talk about peace, about Bob's lessons. You're lovin' every minute of bein' the shadow again. For the first time, something like doubt flickered across my face. Emma saw it, and her heart clenched. Because Blackwood was right. There was a part of me that had awakened, a deadly part that moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Maybe, I admitted quietly. Maybe that's why Bob made me promise to stop. Because he saw what I couldn't, how easy it is to become what you're fightin'. Then you're no better than us. Blackwood pressed his advantage. Just another killer with a fancy name. No. The word came not from me, but from Doc Green. The physician looked up from Tendon McAllister, his hands bloody, but his eyes clear. You're wrong about him. Dead wrong. Doc, I warned. But Green continued. I've watched this man serve drinks to saints and sinners alike for 5 years. Watched him break up fights with words instead of fists, help drunks home instead of letting them freeze, extend credit to families down on their luck. The doctor's voice grew stronger. That's not a killer wearing a bartender's mask. That's a good man wearing the Shadow's gun. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with truth. Even Blackwood appeared momentarily at a loss. Cuff him, I ordered Thorne, tossing another pair of handcuffs. Behind his back. You try anything clever, and I'll show you just how much of the Shadow is still in me. Thorne, his wrist still aching, complied with shaken hands. You really think this ends with us behind bars? Blackwood laughed as the cuffs clicked shut. The minute word gets out that the Prairie Shadow is alive, every gunslinger from here to Texas will come looking for you. Your quiet life, your peace. It's over. Maybe, I agreed. But right now, all I care about is getting Bob to a doctor. The rest, I shrugged. The rest is tomorrow's problem. Then you're a fool, Blackwood sneered, because tomorrow's problems have a way of showing up today. As if on cue, hoofbeats thundered outside the saloon. Many hoofbeats, growing louder by the second. Ah, Blackwood's smile was terrible to behold. Right on time. My expression didn't change, but my grip tightened almost imperceptibly on my gun. Emma, I called softly, get Doc and Bob out the back. Now. Nate, Emma started to protest. The rest of Blackwood's gang, I said quietly. The ones who weren't with him in Cedar Ridge, the ones I should have known were coming. My eyes met hers. Get them out, please. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Boot steps approached the saloon doors, accompanied by the jingle of spurs and the metallic click of weapons being readied. Well, Shadow, Blackwood's smile widened. Still think you can read every man's intentions? No, I replied, moving to stand between the approaching footsteps and my wounded friend. But I can read yours, and I know what's coming through that door isn't near as dangerous as what's already inside. Lightning flashed once more, and in its brilliant glare the Prairie Shadow's silhouette seemed to grow, spreading across the floor like a promise. Or a warning! The saloon doors creaked open, slowly, deliberately. Through the gap came the gleam of gun barrels, maybe 10 of them. The night was far from over. The deepest darkness was yet to come. Chapter 10. Dawn and the New Beginning, 5127. The storm's fury painted everything in shades of shadow and lightning, turning the armed men into lumen silhouettes. Quite a reunion, the lead figure drawled, stepping into the light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved from granite and eyes like chips of ice. The famous Prairie Shadow, tending bar in a dusty nowhere town. Almost didn't believe it when the boys rode out to tell us. Wade Hawkins, I said quietly. Still riding with trash, I see. Still breathing, Wade corrected, his eyes taking in the scene, his captured companions, the wounded men, the growing pool of blood around Marshal McAllister. Which is more than I can say for some folks. More men filed in behind him, spreading out. Emma, still trying to help Doc Green move McAllister, counted 8 guns, all pointed at me. Emma! My voice was soft but carried an edge of steel. Get Bob out, now! Nobody's going anywhere, Wade commanded, his men shifting to block both exits. Not until we settle some old business. Blackwood, still handcuffed, laughed from his position on the floor. Told you there'd be complications, Shadow. Wade's been running what's left of the Matthews gang since you killed old Mad Dog. Deadwood, Wade nodded. Been a long time since anyone spoke that name, but some debts don't fade with time. My gun hadn't moved, still trained on Blackwood, but my eyes scanned the room, reading angles, distances, shadows. Your brother made his choice in Deadwood, I said to Wade. Same as Mad Dog did. My brother was 17, Wade's voice cracked like a whip. Your brother was a killer, I corrected. Same as you, same as Mad Dog. He chose his path. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the hatred in Wade's eyes. And you chose to gun him down, shot him in the back while he was running. No. My denial was flat, absolute. I shot him in the front while he was drawing on a woman and her child. I saw his eyes when he died. He knew what he was doing, just like you know what you're doing now. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Doc Green had managed to get McAllister into a sitting position against the wall, but the marshal's breathing was labored. 8 guns, Wade, I said softly. 8 experienced killers against one washed-up legend playing bartender. How do you like those odds, Shadow? Better than you'd think. My voice remained steady. Because I've been watching your men since they walked in. The one by the window, he's favoring his right leg. Old injury, probably slows his draw. The 2 by the bar are standing too close together. They'll get in each other's way. The one behind you is scared. His gun hand's shaking so bad he's likely to shoot one of his own. Wade's eyes narrowed. You always did talk too much. Part of being a bartender, I replied. You learn to read people, learn their habits, their fears, like how your left eye twitches when you're about to draw. Just like it did in Deadwood, just before your brother died. The words hit Wade like physical blows. His face contorted with rage. Kill him! He roared. Kill him now! What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, yet was over in seconds. I moved like liquid shadow, my gun barking 3 times before anyone could react. The first shot took out the lamp above Wade's head, plunging half the room into darkness. The second caught the floorboard at the feet of the 2 men by the bar, sending them stumbling into each other. The third hit the window behind the injured gunman, making him duck instinctively. In the confusion, I rolled behind an overturned table as guns blazed, bullets splintering wood and shattering bottles, filling the air with the smell of gunpowder and spilled whiskey. Get Bob out, I shouted to Emma over the chaos. Doc, go with him! Emma and Green half-carried, half-dragged McAllister toward the back door, as Wade's men tried to adjust to the darkness and my new position. Spread out, Wade commanded. He's just one man. One man who knows this room better than he knows himself. My voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. One man who spent 5 years memorizing every creak in these floorboards, every shadow cast by these lamps, every angle bullets can travel. A shot rang out, and one of Wade's men screamed, his gun hand suddenly useless. One man, I continued, who's had 5 years to prepare for exactly this kind of night. Another shot, another cry of pain. Wade's men were shooting at shadows now. You're just proving what I always said, Wade shouted into the darkness. You're a killer, Shadow, a cold-blooded murderer hiding behind fancy words and a bartender's apron. No. My voice was closer now. I'm what Bob taught me to be, a man who chooses his battles, and right now, I'm choosing to give your men a chance to walk away. One of Wade's gunmen suddenly bolted for the door, then another. In the storm's flickering light, their fear was plain to see. Cowards, Wade roared. Stand and fight. They're not cowards, I said quietly. They're smart. They figured out what you haven't, that there's a difference between being willing to kill and being willing to die. Only 3 of Wade's men remained now, plus Wade himself. Blackwood watched it all with a mixture of fury and fascination. "Come on, Shadow," Wade challenged, spinning in place, trying to locate his target. "Face me like a man. Or are you just going to hide in the dark like the coward who shot my brother?" "I didn't hide then," my voice came from directly behind him, "and I'm not hiding now." Wade whirled, his gun coming up, but he was far too late. The prairie shadow stood less than 3 feet away, my weapon already leveled. "Your brother died trying to murder innocents," I said softly. "Is that really the legacy you want to die for?" Lightning flashed one final time, illuminating us both in stark relief. Wade, with hatred twisting his features. Me, with the calm certainty of a man who had made peace with violence long ago. And in that frozen moment, Wade's left eye twitched. The shot came not from Wade, but from behind. One of his remaining men had circled around in the chaos. I felt the bullet tear through my left shoulder, spinning me sideways. My own shot at Wade went wide, shattering a mirror behind the bar. "Not so legendary now, are you?" Wade laughed, regaining his confidence as I stumbled against a table. The great prairie shadow, bleeding like any other man. My gun hand stayed steady, but blood darkened my shirt at an alarming rate. The wound wasn't fatal, but it was bad enough to matter, to slow me down, to make me human. "Emma!" I shouted, hearing movement near the back door. "I told you to get out!" "Not without you!" she called back, and I heard the distinctive sound of her rifle being cocked. "Don't!" I warned, but it was too late. Emma's shot caught one of Wade's remaining men in the leg, dropping him, but the muzzle flash gave away her position, and Wade's other man was already turning, his gun rising. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself across the room, my injured shoulder screaming in protest, and tackled Emma as the outlaw's bullet whistled through the space where she had been. We crashed behind the bar together as bottles exploded overhead. "Touchin'," Wade's voice dripped with mockery. "The shadow does have a heart after all." A pause. Then, "Bring the marshal back in here." My blood ran cold as I heard the sounds of struggle. One of Wade's men must have circled around outside. He had Doc Green at gunpoint, forcing him and McAllister back through the door. "Let them go," I called out, my voice steady despite the pain. "This is between us." "No," Wade replied. "This is about family. About watching the ones you love die, just like I had to watch my brother die. The great prairie shadow, brought low by the same weakness that retired him in the first place. You care too much." Emma tried to rise, but I held her down as more bullets splintered the bar above us. "Stay still," I whispered. "Please." "You can't save them all, Shadow," Wade shouted. "Just like you couldn't save that woman in Deadwood. What was her name? Sarah?" The name hit me like a physical blow. 5 years of peace, of trying to forget, crashed down around me. I saw Sarah's face, heard her last words, felt her blood on my hands all over again. "That's right." Wade pressed his advantage. "The boys told me all about her, how you tried to leave the life behind for her, how Mad Dog's gang found you anyway, how you weren't fast enough to save her." "Don't." My voice was barely a whisper. And now, history repeats itself. Wade's boots creaked on the floorboards as he moved closer. The marshal who tried to save your soul. The woman who gave you a chance at a new life. The doctor who kept your secrets. Which one should die first? Emma's hand found mine in the darkness behind the bar. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "you gave us 5 years of peace. That's worth something." But I barely heard her. My mind was racing backward through time, to that night in Deadwood, when it had all gone wrong, when I'd been too confident, too sure of myself. "I can't," I started, my voice cracking. "Can't what?" Wade taunted. "Can't save 'em? Can't bear to watch 'em die? Or can't admit that everything Bob taught you about peace was a lie?" The storm outside had begun to fade. In the relative quiet, I could hear McAllister's labored breathing, Doc Green's attempts to keep him steady, Emma's heart pounding next to mine. You know what your problem is, Shadow? Wade continued. You never understood what this life really means. It's not about being the fastest or the deadliest. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes, to sacrifice anyone and anything, to win. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my gun, the burn of my wound, the tremor in my hands that came not from fear, but from something deeper, the knowledge that whatever I did next would define me forever. You're right, I said finally, my voice carrying clearly through the smoky air. I do care too much. Always have. I squeezed Emma's hand once, then let go. That's what Bob saw in me all those years ago. Not just a fast gun, but a man who could feel the weight of every trigger pull, every life taken. Philosophy won't save him, Wade sneered. No, I agreed. But it might save you. I raised my voice. All of you, listen carefully. In about 10 seconds, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to drop my gun, and then you're going to have a choice. The only choice, Wade laughed, is which one dies first. Wrong. My voice had changed, becoming something ancient and terrible. The choice is whether you want to be the men who killed an injured marshal, a doctor trying to save lives, and an innocent woman, or the men who walked away and lived to tell about it. You're in no position to make threats, Wade said. But there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. Not a threat, I replied. A prophecy. Because if you harm any of them, if you spill one more drop of innocent blood in this saloon... I took a deep breath. Then the prairie shadow stops trying to save your lives and goes back to what he does best. The silence that followed was absolute. You're bluffing, Wade said finally, but his voice shook slightly. Am I? I asked softly. You've heard the stories. You know what I was, what I can be again. So ask yourself, do you really want to force that choice? Do you want to be the one who brings death back to life? Emma felt me shifting beside her, preparing to rise. Nate, she whispered, don't. But I was already standing, my gun held loosely at my side. Blood dripped steadily from my wounded shoulder, but my eyes were what held everyone transfixed. They were no longer the eyes of a bartender or even of a legendary gunfighter. They were the eyes of a man looking into an abyss and choosing to step forward anyway. Time seemed to crystallize. Drop the gun, Wade ordered, his voice trembling. My weapon hit the floor with a sound like distant thunder. There, I said quietly. Now you have what you wanted, the prairie shadow unarmed and bleeding. My eyes found Wade's. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Kill him, Blackwood called from the floor. Kill him now before he tries something. But Wade hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw something I recognized, the same doubt I'd felt in Deadwood. Your brother had that same look, I said softly. Right before he made his choice, right before he decided that killing was easier than living with doubt. Shut up. Wade's gun wavered. You don't get to talk about him. I remember every man I've killed, I continued, my voice carrying. Every face, every moment. Your brother's eyes were green, like your mother's. He told me that right before he drew, said it was the only good thing he got from her. Wade's face went pale. How did you... Because I listened, I replied simply. That's what Bob taught me, that every man, even the ones you have to kill, deserves to be heard, to be remembered. Boss, one of Wade's remaining men called nervously, something ain't right here. 5 years, I went on, taking a small step forward. 5 years I've poured drinks and listened to stories. Learned that every man who walks through those doors is carrying something. Pain, fear, regret. Another step. Even you, Wade, especially you. Stay back. Wade's gun tracked my movement, but his hand was shaken now. You know what I learned most of all? My voice dropped lower, becoming almost gentle. I learned that the man who needs everyone to fear him is usually the most frightened of all. At that moment, Doc Green shifted to shield the marshal. Emma's hand found her fallen rifle, and the last of Wade's loyal men began backing toward the door. "Now, Wade!" Blackwood shouted. But his men didn't move. They had seen something in my eyes that scared them more than their leader's wrath. "They're not going to shoot," I said with quiet certainty. "Because they finally understand what Bob taught me years ago, that there's a difference between being a killer and being a murderer. They'll shoot if I tell them to shoot." Wade's voice rose to a desperate pitch. "No." I shook my head slowly. "They won't, because they can feel it. What's coming? What happens if they cross that line?" I took another step forward. "You feel it too, don't you, Wade? That voice in your head telling you this isn't what your brother would have wanted. You don't know what he wanted." Wade's finger tightened on the trigger. "He forced my hand," I corrected gently. "Just like you're trying to force it now. But ask yourself, is this really about your brother? Or is it about you, trying to live up to a legacy of violence that never brought anyone peace?" 1:08:38. Wade's gun barrel dipped slightly. Behind him, his last two men exchanged glances and began moving slowly toward the exit. "You can still walk away," I continued, close enough now that Wade's gun nearly touched my chest. "Can still choose a different path. That's what Bob taught me, that it's never too late to change." "Boss," one of the remaining outlaws called from the doorway, "we're leaving. This ain't worth dying for." "Cowards." Wade's shout was ragged. "The great prairie shadow is right in front of us, unarmed, and you're running." "No." My voice was barely a whisper now. "They're not running. They're living. Something your brother never got the chance to learn." Wade's gun pressed against my chest, right over my heart. "I could kill you right now, end the legend once and for all." "Could," I agreed. "But you won't. Because you finally figured out what I learned 5 years ago, that pulling a trigger is easy. Living with it afterward, that's the hard part." For a long moment, the only sound was the fading storm and Wade's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, incredibly, his gun barrel began to lower. "What are you doing?" Blackwood demanded. "Kill him! Kill all of them!" But Wade wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on mine, seeing perhaps for the first time what his brother had seen. Not a legend, not a killer, but a man who carried the weight of every life he'd taken. "My brother," Wade said hoarsely. He really did draw first?" "Yes," I replied softly. "And his last words were about you. About hoping you'd choose a better path." The gun slipped from Wade's fingers, hitting the floor with a finality that seemed to echo through the years. Behind him, his last men melted away into the night, leaving only the sound of distant hoofbeats. "It's over," I said quietly, not just to Wade, but to everyone in the room. "The killing stops here." Emma emerged from behind the bar, her rifle trained on Wade, but her eyes on me. Doc Green resumed tending to McAllister, whose breathing had steadied. And outside, the storm finally broke, moonlight streaming through the windows. Wade sank to his knees, years of hatred and vengeance draining from him. What happens now?" My reply was interrupted by a weak voice from the corner. "Now," Marshal McAllister said, struggling to sit up, "we all learn to live with our choices, just like I taught him to do all those years ago." The prairie shadow looked at his old friend, then at the woman who had given him a chance at a new life, then finally at the man who had come to kill him but found redemption instead. "No," I corrected gently. "Now, we learn to live with our choices. Together." Dawn broke over Whisper Valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and promise. The Silver Star Saloon bore the scars of the night's violence, but it still stood, much like the man who had defended it. I worked methodically behind the bar, my left arm in a sling, cleaning glasses, just as I had done every morning for the past 5 years. The routine was the same, but something had changed. "You don't have to do that now," Emma said softly, watching me. "Doc Green said you need rest." "Rest can wait," I replied, not looking up. "Some things need to be put right first." Through the window, We could see Marshall McAllister being tended to in Doc Green's office. He'd live. In the jail next door, Wade and his surviving men sat quietly in their cells, their fighting spirits broken. Word's already spreadin', Emma continued, moving to help me. About what happened here. About who you really are. Who I was, I corrected gently. The prairie shadow died last night, along with a lot of old ghosts. Did he? Emma's voice carried a hint of doubt. Those men who ran, they'll talk. More will come looking to make a name for themselves. I finally stopped my work, looking at her directly. Let them come. They'll find what those before 'em found, just a bartender who listens more than he shoots. The morning light caught the silver in my hair, the new lines around my eyes. I looked both older and younger somehow. You're really going to stay? Emma asked, hope wearing with concern. Even after all this? 5 years ago, I said slowly. Bob McAllister found me in Deadwood, drowning in guilt and whiskey after Sarah's death. He could have drawn on me. Instead, he sat down and ordered a drink. Talked to me about peace, about choices. I touched the scar on my shoulder. Last night I finally understood what he was trying to teach me. It's not about hanging up your guns or pretending the past never happened. It's about choosing who you want to be, every single day. The door creaked open, and old Walt shuffled in. He paused, taking in the destruction, then smiled. Heard there was some excitement last night. Sorry I missed it. My lips twitched in what might have been a smile as I poured the old man his usual. Some things, at least, hadn't changed. Town's already talking about rebuilding, Emma said. Marshall McAllister says he'll recommend a commendation for how you handled things, without killing anyone, I mean. Bob always did believe in redemption, I nodded. Even for men like Wade. Maybe especially for men like Wade. Through the window, we could see life returning to Whisper Valley. You know, Emma said thoughtfully, I always wondered why you chose this place. Why here? I was quiet for a long moment. Because it was quiet, I said finally. Because it needed someone to tend the bar and listen to stories. I paused, looking around. Because some places, like some people, deserve a second chance. The door opened again, and Doc Green entered, exhausted, but satisfied. Marshall's going to make it. Says he wants to talk to you, Nate. About the future. Future's right here, I replied, gesturing to the saloon. Always was. As if to emphasize my point, I reached up and removed the shotgun from its hiding place. Everyone watched as I unloaded it, then placed it carefully in a box with my gun belt. Won't you need those? Emma asked softly. If others come looking for the shadow? No. I shook my head. Because they won't find him. They'll find what Wade and his men found, something a lot more dangerous than a fast gun. And what's that? Doc Green asked, though his smile suggested he already knew. A man at peace with his past, I replied, returning to my endless task of polishing glasses. A man who learned that the hardest battles are won with words instead of bullets. A man who finally understood what Bob was trying to teach him all along. Which is? Emma pressed. I looked up, and in my eyes, they saw not the deadly gunfighter of legend, not the quiet bartender of the past 5 years, but something new, something that combined the strength of one with the wisdom of the other. That true courage isn't about being faster than the other man's bullet, I said softly. It's about being strong enough to offer him a drink instead. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of night. Whisper Valley stirred to life, forever changed, but somehow stronger. And in the Silver Star Saloon, a bartender who had once been a legend continued his work, one glass at a time, at peace with who he had been and who he had chosen to become. The prairie shadow was gone, but something better had taken his place. A man who had learned that the greatest victories are won not with a gun, but with understanding. A man who had finally found his true calling, not in dealing death, but in pouring hope, one drink at a time, in a dusty saloon where legends could rest and ordinary men could find redemption.